Indolence of the Filipino o sobrang la indolencia de los Filipinos. Kung ating maaalala na sa kwentong Juan Tamad ay pinapakita ang katamaran ni Juan na siyang hinihintay lamang ang pagkahulog ng bayabas sa ilalim ng puno. Sa parang ito ba mapapakita na si Juan ay tamad? O nilalarawan ba nito na ang mga Pilipino ay tamad?
Juan! Nasaan ka na naman?
Sandali lang po, Nay. Babagsak na yung biyaya, oh.
Sobre la Indolencia de los Filipinos was written by Dr. Jose Rizal in the La Solidaridad newspaper and was published on July 15, 1890 to September 15, 1890. They concluded that it was his longest essay and the most analytical study made by Rizal about our society during the Spanish regime. Before we proceed to the reason why Rizal wrote Indolence of the Filipino, we should know first the meaning of indolence or indolent. So what is an indolent? First, lazy, katamaran. Next is idle person or ang taong walang ginagawa, and a little love for work.
The socio-economic context. Rizal emphasized that whenever something goes wrong in the Philippines, there is a tendency to blame the Filipinos. Rizal wrote The Indolence of the Filipino as a sort of defense against the allegations and accusations of the Spaniards that Filipinos are indolent or lazy. Rizal wondered why whenever something awful happens in the country, the Filipinos are held totally responsible for it. According to the Spaniards, the backwardness in the country and the fall of its economic activities was caused by their indolence. On this basis, Rizal tried to analyze the social and political conditions of the time to prove that the indolence was the cause rather than the effect of the backwardness in the country. In order to clarify things out, Rizal conducted a thorough investigation in order to refute the charge that Filipinos were indolent, would rather gamble their money than work in the fields. He began his essay by describing what life was like in the Philippines before the arrival of the colonizers, especially the Spaniards. Citing the accounts of Morga, San Agustin, and Colin among others, who spoke of the abundance and riches of the islands as well as the people's diplomacy in dealing with strangers. Then, when the Spaniards came to conquer the country, Rizal explained how the Filipinos were reduced to idiocy. Rizal made a critical study of the causes why his people did not work hard during the Spanish regime. His main thesis was that the Filipinos are not by nature indolent.
Rizal's assertion. In Rizal's assertion, two things were considered as main points. The first point is Rizal insisted that the Filipinos were not inherently indolent. The second, he made a distinction between being indolent as a reaction to climate. Filipinos were not born lazy, but had the predisposition to become lazy. Acknowledging the tendency for the Filipinos to become indolent due in part to the tropical climate, Rizal noted that the European, who was surrounded by servants, was paragon of laziness in the tropics. People in the tropics are expected to work less. Hot climate, however, was compensated by the fertility of the soil. Hence, peasants did not have to work hard to ensure good crops. Long ago, before the coming of the Spaniards, Filipinos were industrious and hardworking. They were very active in agriculture, industries, and commerce. The Spanish conquest of the country brought a decline in economic activities because the Filipinos abandoned their pre-Spanish economic industries and worked less than their ancestors. So mainly according to Rizal's point, um, indolence were highly influenced by the Spaniards. Colonizing the country is the main reason why the Filipinos adopted this awful trait.
Deterioration of the industry in the Filipinos. The Spaniards pointed out that the decline of the economy in the Philippines was primarily due to the Filipinos' indolence, and this is one of the issues where Rizal focused on, and he defended the Filipino by providing logical and historical facts. Rizal went into pre-colonial history to address the colonialist view of Filipino indolence. The facts prove that the pre-colonial Filipino society was relatively advanced, suggesting that the presumed backwardness was due to colonialism. In addition, Zaidi 2008 has provided that the deterioration could be attributed to two factors. First, those attributable to Spanish colonizer; second, those attributable to Filipinos' own faults. Deterioration attributed to the Spanish colonizer. First, the wars which the Filipino fought for Spain against Dutch, Portuguese, English, and other enemies. The battles of Manila Bay on May 1, 1898, and the battles of La Naval de Manila on March 15, 1646. There are several wars that happened between Spain and other countries, and some of this war happened here in the Philippines, particularly in Manila. We know that if there is a war, there is a decline in economy. Serious economic costs like the damage to infrastructure, a decline in the working population, inflation, shortage, uncertainty, and disruption to normal economic activity. Next, the frightful raids on the coastal towns and village of Christian Philippines by Muslim Moro pirates of Mindanao and Sulu. Since there is a conflict between Spaniards and Moro during Spanish era, Moros are forced to raid the coastal town and village of Christian Philippines to show anti-colonial resistance, and these frightful raids result to the decline of Philippine economy since Spanish government do not provide security protection for the Filipinos who live in coastal areas. Next, the forced labor which compelled thousands of Filipino laborers, shipyards, roads, bridges, and other public works, resulting in the abandonment of industry, commerce, and agriculture. Because of the forced labor, Filipino don't have time to develop their own businesses, and they spend most of their time doing labor for Spaniards. Lack of stimulus to work harder because the people could not enjoy the fruit of their labor. Filipinos between 16 to 60 years old were entitled to pay tax to the Spaniard which cost between 8 to 10 reales. Next, the government neglect and indifference to agriculture, industry, and commerce. The bad example shown by Spaniards in despising manual labor. The official reported to work at noon and left early doing nothing in line with their duties. The women were seen constantly followed by servants, which dressed them and fund them personal things which they ought to have done for themselves. Next, the teaching of Spanish missionary that it is easier for poor man to enter heaven than for rich man. Because of this teaching, they preferred not to work and remain poor so they could easily enter heaven after they died. Encouragement and propagation of gambling by Spanish authority. Gambling was established and widely propagated during this time. Almost every day there were cockfights. During fast days, the government officials and friars were the first to engage in all sorts of bets and gambles. Lastly, the system of Spanish education did not promote economic enterprise and activity. What was being taught in the schools were repetitive prayers and other things that could not be used by the students to lead the country to progress. There were no courses in agriculture and industry, which were badly needed by the Philippines during those times. As Rizal asserted, the education of native was, from his birth until he sinks into his grave, is brutalizing, depressive, and anti-human. It deprived him of his dignity.
Deterioration attributed to Filipinos' own fault. In this topic, we could observe a lot of similarities between the Filipinos and the Spanish culture. We could also observe some traits and attitudes that serves as the result of being colonized or of being mistreated. Number 1, feeling of inferiority. This trait emphasizes one's lack of confidence, the trait of being or feeling lower than the others. We can see here a person that is looking down on his own self, not being able to stand on his own, or the feeling of insecurity within him. Second is placing faith and hopes on miracles. Having this kind of trait mostly applies to religious people as we are influenced with the beliefs of having hope and seeing miracles through prayers and faith, which is taught on religious organizations. The next is the lack of spirit to pursue lofty purposes. In this part, we can clearly see that the person himself is the one who discourages himself. Just like the first number, he is not confident enough for himself to do things that may change his life or have a greater purpose for his life. He does not look out for greater things in the future that he might achieve if he would make a move and pursue what he wants to do. Lastly, number 4, the lack of national sentiment. In here, we could see that Filipinos lack emotion for their own nationality or for their own country. An example for this is that how the Filipino people support artists from other countries or entertainments from other countries other rather than supporting their own. Just like how we support Korean actors and Korean artists, but laugh on our own Filipino artists and Filipino actors when it comes to creating drama series or music, or even on how we choose to abide with money than choosing the future for the country in terms of political aspects. Rizal concluded his essays by stressing the need for good education and library as keys to achieving progress and to solve indolence. So Rizal sees education as the key to success in every aspect in the human living, even in indolence when it comes to laziness. Without education and liberty, the soil and the sun of mankind, no reform is possible. Measure can give the desired result. Since some day or other he will be enlightened, whether the government likes it or not. Let his enlightenment be as a gift given to him and not as a spoil of war. We wish policy to be sincere and consistent or highly civilizing without petty reservations, without distrust, without fear, nor misgivings, without ulterior thoughts of gratitude and ingratitude, or if not, a policy of courageous, open exploitation, tyrannical and selfish without hypocrisy or deception, without a well thought out and studied system of domination and compelling obedience for ruling to get rich to enjoy. National Heroes Commission, 1964.
Juan! Ha! Haro, Diyos ko! Ang tamad-tamad mo talaga!
Abay, kita mo si Juan Tabat
Bumalik
sa
ka rito!
pagtakbo sinisipag.
Pinaghirapan ko yung putong yun!